So the name of the presentation is The Bad Speller. The presentation gets its name from a lesser work of the children's author and longtime illustrator at the New Yorker, William Steig. He had this remarkable career at the New Yorker that, if you can believe it, ran from 1930 until 2001. At the magazine, he ran in literary elite circles. He was good friends with Langston Hughes and other luminaries from the Harlem Renaissance, with his colleagues at the New Yorker, like James Thurber and E.B. White and others. And it was only in about 1970 that he got into writing children's books, late in his professional life. He's probably most known today as the author of Shrek, but I'm most interested in his books that I call the wordplay series that he did. So here's a little flavor of what Steig did at the New Yorker, especially early on in his career. He was very concerned with social issues early on. He was kind of an organic intellectual, came from an immigrant working class family. And on the right, you could see that in his early days at the magazine, he was very interested in documenting tenement life, working class life, working poor life. As his career progressed, and he got more and more interested in larger questions about the human condition, he still included this kind of pervading sense of melancholy in his work. And one interesting theme is that in his illustrations, humans and animals were about equally as likely to sort of wrestle with existential angst, especially before Thanksgiving, as you can see in this cover. So The Bad Speller, to call it a lesser work is an understatement. Aside from a couple used copies that are available on eBay, this book is virtually invisible online. It's not mentioned in his obituaries. It's not mentioned even on his otherwise very thorough Wikipedia page. It's a really unusual book. It's kind of rudimentary drawings, many featuring anthropomorphic animals or put upon humans, or scenes from biblical stories and fairy tales and other kind of familiar narratives and myths. And the captions for the illustrations contain lots of unconventional spellings. So as a teacher of writing and a person who does a lot of research into remedial student writing, I'm very interested in error, especially the kind of cultural resonance around error. And in The Bad Speller, Steig does this interesting thing where virtually all of the spelling errors in the book, or unconventional spellings, have some kind of aesthetic appeal if you look at them closely. So one example of that would be neologisms. You could see him using wood as a noun, which is really interesting. This is actually my favorite line in the whole book. The woods is a really great phrase. It could be from like an Ogden Nash poem, or possibly like a Maureen Dowd op-ed at the New York Times. Maureen Dowd writing about the Hillary Clinton campaign being adrift and second guessing themselves. It's this really terrific pun that emerges from a neologism, but also it emerges from a spelling error, essentially. The errors are also interesting because they underline this larger kind of worldview that I think Steig has. That worldview might be described as the world is a frightening place, the world is an unpredictable place, the world is an unstable place, and the kind of instability of his spelling underlines that worldview in all kinds of interesting ways. So in addition to the neologisms, he also uses a lot of homophones. So a lot of the spelling errors are actually homophones. There's these kind of large philosophical questions, but there's also at times juvenile humor that appealed to me a lot when I was a little boy, and this was my favorite book. Here you can see the conjunction but misspelled as B-U-T-T, because it's a cartoon about dogs identifying each other by the sense of smell. So there's this kind of whimsical humor, but the sense of the unknown is still present, right? Like if you look at the cartoon, why does the dog want to be a donkey, right? Why would a dog want to hide their true nature? So this larger thing is definitely at work. Along with the misspellings as poetic device and misspellings as feeding into his larger aesthetic, I'm also very interested in the patterns of error in the text. So if you do kind of a superficial read of the book, It might look like the spelling is haphazard or lazy or random. And it's really not, in so much as it follows a pattern, right? And you can see in this chart the 5 most commonly misspelled words throughout the text. And the patterns are pretty overwhelming, right? Like is always misspelled as iz, etc. But even beyond individual words that are spelled consistently, the kinds of errors are also very consistent, right? So an initial hard C sound, which is most often spelled with a C conventionally in the English language, is virtually always spelled with a K, with an initial K. Words that conventionally end with ing are almost invariably misspelled with an omitted I or an omitted G. There's this interesting kind of overgeneralization of rhymed words where my, as you can see there, my is spelled as if it rhymes with high. Geese is misspelled as if it rhymes with peace. And that is one of the patterns that's especially significant, or one that I've thought about quite a bit, because it kind of mirrors this thing in student writing, in student error, where there's a really foundational work in my field by Mina Shaughnessy, where she charts out the intentionality and consistency of what we look at as errors. So the bad speller is kind of mirroring that. So what? I read the bad speller as a reflection on how we assign cultural capital to correctness and also to error. We might remember, even though it was 30 years ago, Dan Quayle misspelling potato. We might joke on social media about student malapropisms. Both of those things mean something. Both of those things matter. I think you can look at Steig as punching up at the English language for its inconsistencies and absurdities. You can also look at Steig as punching down at people who commit errors. You know, not for nothing, his best friend at the New Yorker was E.B. White, who co-wrote the most famous and notable style and grammar guide in the English language. So these are the questions that I'm thinking about. Who is the titular bad speller? Is it the student error committer? Or is it the public figure who we sort of make judgments about based on the persona created by the errors that they commit? So thank you. And I'd love to hear from folks interested via email.